Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with the biblical worldview. If you've been listening and you like what you hear, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button for me, leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out and help spread the word and serve our mission to make a difference. So again, thank you for being here and thank you for helping us spread the word. Today's extra credit version of the Clearly Christian Podcast is a deeper dive into the chalkboard points from our recent conversation with Justin Savini. He was the Director of Advancement at Dlmarva Christian Schools, and he's the founder of Savini Solutions. We talked about changing our mindset when it comes to fundraising and the impact this can have on both your profit and your purpose. So now for some extra credit thoughts, further thoughts and questions, let's bring in our show's producer, Brian Lefelock. What'd you think of the show, Brian? And where do you want to take us today?
My number one thought is that he is passionate about what he does, and he's passionate about fundraising. And I think that's the difference, isn't it, Cy? It's not about, I don't want to raise money. It's about, look what I can do when I do raise money. What is his passion? Does his passion inspire you to do some of those fundraising activities that aren't really easy?
It is. Yeah, you're right. And I love the passion, love the energy. I love his youthfulness. You know, I joked with him off the air about his age versus my age, but I love that because I love his energy. He's launching his career and getting started and saying, wait a minute, this is my life's work. And yet most of this population, especially Christian school leaders, think negatively of it, and yet I'm excited to do it. And like you said, I get to do this because I get to make a real impact for the kingdom. And that's why he started his own company and branched off of that. And so he did so because he sees a need there. And like you said, he's a real enthusiasm for what God can do. And let's face it, he's just so blatantly obvious about the fact that you have to have money to do some of these things. And oftentimes you just have to have money to do them well. And there is a price tag for excellence. And we talk about that in Christian school business more and more, right? We're not going to J.D. Byrider and buying the Mercedes-Benz, right? If you want the Mercedes-Benz and the BMW, you're going to have to, you want it new especially, or certified used, right? You're going to have to go to those lots and you're going to pay a little bit more because you wanted this particular brand of excellence. So what in the world are we doing saying, well, we give you the most excellent education from a biblical worldview and we don't charge what it cost? That makes zero sense from a business perspective, yet we have done that for decades in Christian schools. And Justin knows it even as a young person, so kudos to him.
He said, I think he said the scarcity mindset has crippled Christian education for decades. And you then brought up, it's been since the 60s. It's always been just trying to stay afloat, just trying to do the right thing. But when you don't have money, when you don't have what you need, how do you make the investment? How do you step outside of the boat and say, okay, we're going to take this leap to do the things that we need to do? And you just wait for the money to come later? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, you're going to have to think like a business, and we just didn't do this for years and years, right? So again, if you were a CEO of a company like that and you were running a restaurant or anything else, you would never continue to operate at break even or loss, right? Because we would never get better. And the bank who loaned you the money to start that business would never let you operate that well either, right? You would say as the owner, I must figure out in this company how to churn a profit or I will close. And yet, for some reason, schools, we just never did that. We always thought, hey, we know our mission is this important. God will sustain us. We'll get by, blah, blah, blah. And so we'll just continue to eke out the barest of minimum, no margin, break even, or even operate a loss. And then we'll go to our donors and say, well, listen, we ran a loss this year of $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. Would you help us make up the loss so that we can stay afloat? And that was Christian schools for decades and decades and decades. And because it was a ministry and people were kind-hearted and wanted to see it survive because their kids were there a lot of time, or grandkids, they would say, okay, yep, here's a couple $1,000s. And so you had banquets and fundraisers, and so you just funded the margin on the goodwill of other believers out there that wanted to see you survive. But it was a terrible business model. It doesn't work over time because you're forever just chasing donors just to survive. And so you just never have any margin. Like he said, that's what the scarcity mindset is. There's never going to be any margin. So you're never going to have the ability to invest and get better. And so just unfortunately, we got started good intentions, great intentions. And I certainly don't want to speak bad of our founding fathers, but they didn't know how to run a business in this sense. And it really hurt us right out of the gate. And those of us that are still running Christian schools in the last, 10, 15 years, and especially now, we've had to completely shift our mindset. That's why I was so excited to talk to Justin.
Well, in business, there's only two things you can do. You either make it cheaper or cut your services, or you raise more money. And both of those are options. But we want to raise more money, and that's what successful businesses do. They don't race to the bottom and see how cheap they can get. They offer a better product. And that's what you've done at your school. And I'm interested. So there is that break-even point that every business deals with, and every year you have to kind of manage that. But do you, behind the scenes, Si, do you forecast in your mind, what if we had this extra $1 million? What if I could raise this here? Or are you more focused on, okay, we've got to make the ends meet? But in the back of your mind, are you wishing and thinking?
No, I think you're exactly right. No, I try to live in that other area. I try to live in listen, we're going to make some money. It may be a little less some years than others, but we are not going to run in the red. We have to make some money. And if we're not, how can we? Like you said, and preferably not by cutting expenses. That's the last thing we want to do, because you're exactly right. I'm trying to always get better. What's the culture of continuous improvement? How can we be innovative? How can we offer a product that people will pay for? I like to say this. The studies were they were out there. Everybody knew them. During the recession, and even, years and years ago when times were lean, these boarding schools that had reputations for just incredible, education, especially up and down the East Coast, they didn't lose a student. They still had waiting lists to get in, and they're charging $35,000, $45,000, $55,000 a year to get in, and nobody went another direction because the reputation of the product was so great. Did sales of Mercedes and BMWs, did those take some drastic dip in the recession? I don't know, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, man, people still wanted those vehicles because their still perception is, man, they're awesome. And if I can ever afford one, I really want to go out and get one of it's the best, right? And so you're constantly now thinking about your school in that way, saying, how do I tell the customer, I know times are tough, but this is not something you can sacrifice because it's just that good. And you would never want your school to be in a situation where you're in this death spiral, as I call it, where you're saying, well, we're going to have to cut this, cut this, cut this, cut this. And then you've just usurped the value of your product. No, I've operated our school the exact opposite. When times were the leanest, that's when I sought to be the most innovative and said, guess what we're doing? And get your customer base excited about something new that's going on at your school. So advance through that is always the way to go.
Justin said, if it's God's will, it's God's bill. And I thought that was just really cool. That really is a faithful step. Like if I'm meant to do this, it's going to be taken care of. And yet it's not that simple. I was told once by a fellow Christian, he says, you can dig your own hole. God's going to give you a shovel, but you're going to have to dig your own hole. Like we got to do the work. What's it like to run a $30 million capital campaign when that's not your job? He mentioned that it's like a pop-up business, a $30 million business that you're running. And yet, Si, you're superintendent, and you've got teachers, and you've got board, and you've got stuff.
Yeah.
How do you, and maybe you're not expert at this. Not everyone is. How do you step out of the box and get that done? If it's God's will, it's God's bill. How do you make that first step?
Yeah, it's not easy because you're exactly right. The superintendency has a CEO of all these organizations. There's so many tentacles. I'm dealing with an academic situation right now that has been brewing beneath me for weeks and weeks, and it finally has risen to my desk. And I haven't seen one of these in a while, but it went through the proper channels. It went through the lowest level teachers and assistant principals, assistant superintendent, and there's been no resolution, which is unfortunate. But ultimately, that academic side answers to me as well, so it's risen to my desk. And it's an issue completely unrelated to running a $30 million campaign and a $9 million company, and nothing close to what I really would like to be doing and need to be doing on a regular basis. But yet there it sits in front of me, and the people depending on me are going to need my advice, or at least I'm going to have to probably chime in. Because if I don't, it's going to come back to bite me, at a board meeting or some other business setting or something like that. So I can't run from it. So you're exactly right. There's just no getting away from the fact that, yes, you are an educational institution and you cannot ignore that. But as much as it depends on me, I have to try to build a team around me that doesn't have to also shoulder that burden. In other words, advancement departments, marketing departments, other people that say, well, yeah, Cy may have those educational issues, but I don't. And I work on another part of Cy's team. So when he's busy doing some of those things that he has to do as the CEO of all things, that business department can still be running and smoothly and doing the work that I've tasked them to do. I just met today with our advancement director and said, hey, let's get together in January. Here's what I want to talk about. I want to put some written proposals on paper. So I'm constantly trying to meet with those people and say, here's the next project. Here's what we're working on. Let's you and I really focus on that. The other things will come to you, but you have to be proactive in doing some of those things that you know are going to advance the organization, and really intentionally spend your time there. You cannot call yourself a leader and sit back and react to everything, right? You got to be proactive in at least one area. And now I'm saying you better be proactive on the business arm of things. The educational arm, that will come to you. You'll get it when you have to.
As I hear you say that, I think it boils down to fundraising and revenue generation and profit is part of your job. It's not a whenever I need it. It's not I better ramp something up. It's part of excellence. And if you're going to deliver excellence for your students and for your families and for your investors and all, it's got to be part of it. Can you help as we wrap up, Cy? He talked about he's a consultant and he helps people do this. Can you help a business owner understand what strategic planning should be? Because I know it opens up opportunities when it's done right. I've seen strategic planning be about let's wordsmith a mission statement and slap it up on the wall, and I don't know that that's it. How can business owners and organizations use strategic planning to benefit them the way that you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. Boy, one thing, it's just got to be consistent. I mean, a lot of organizations will say, hey, we're going to do a strategic planning retreat, and they do it once every 5 years. Well, that can't happen because those days are over. Culture changes too fast. The economy changes too fast, things like that. You almost need to do, and what I do with our school, we do a strategic planning retreat, which is just really an all-day 8 to 4 type event. But we go off campus, just me and the school board, and we do strategic planning annually, where we're looking at not only, and this is a common one, and sometimes we say, well, it's too common, but still valuable. Not only are you doing a SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which are very, very good for you, but you're looking at the prior year and saying, what were our wins, what did we do well, and what were our losses? And given what we know from our SWOT analysis, where do we need to spend our time on in the next year? How do we need to make this better even going forward? So there's some steps we can take in the short term and in the long term. But today, strategic planning, the long term, 3 to 5 max, because the stuff you're doing that's sometimes 3, 4, 5 years out, 2, 3 years later, it could be irrelevant to some degree. So definitely doing those SWOT analysis on an annual basis, revisiting those things, looking for steps you can take in the next 9, 12, 14, 16 months to get better, knock off some of those goals, and then revisiting them on a regular basis. And then again, as you said, it's certainly worth going back over your mission and making sure that everybody knows why we exist, what we're doing, and why we're doing this for. Because you're going to come up with a lot of new initiatives and things like that, and you're going to be tempted to chase down a lot of trails that maybe are good fits and maybe aren't, but you're constantly coming back to, do they line up with your mission? So a lot we could talk about with strategic planning, but the key would be, again, to revisit it year in and year out and taking those steps to get better and pursuing some of those things that are going to work. You just need to take the time to put them in place. And then if not, okay, how do we need to get there? Well, great questions. Thank you again for joining me today on the Clearly Christian podcast. And I trust that now you know more about why it's important to shift your mindset on fundraising and the impact this will have on both your purpose and your profit. Well, if you like the show, again, let us know by following or subscribing. Maybe hit the like button for me. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out. I would certainly appreciate that as we try to make a difference. Remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and live that out. The greatest hope to get there is Christian education. Thank you again. I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this has been Clearly Christian.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.